Bluebook Digital SAT number 10, Math Module 1. For a particular machine that produces beads, 29 out of every 100 beads it produces have a defect. A bead produced by the machine will be selected at random. What is the probability of selecting a bead that has a defect? This seems very straightforward. It's simply 29 out of 100. The equation gives the speed s in miles per hour for a certain car t seconds after it began to accelerate. What is the speed in miles per hour of the car 5 seconds after it began to accelerate? Well, if t is 5, then it's simply 3 times 5, 15, plus 40 is 55. 4x equals 3. What is the value of 24x? If you wanted to, and I always advise being very careful to write things down, so I don't recommend trying to jump to it in your head, you could write the proportion as 4x is to 3 as 24x is to an unknown. And if you really wanted to, in fact, you probably should cross multiply in any situation where you have fraction equals fraction. So this would be 72x equals 4xy. So y is the quotient of 72x and 4x, which you could reduce step at a time in your head if you wanted as 32 over 2, which is 18. Scatterplot shows the relationship between two variables x and y. A line of best fit is shown. Which of the following equations best represents the line of best fit? Now, I know that people could do this by finding a couple of grid components through which it goes. You could also use Desmos to your advantage right here. So for example, if I say that it looks like it goes through approximately, very approximately 14, 16, you could actually get Desmos to do a calculation. If I expand this, you can put in any 2 points that are on a line, and Desmos will spit out the equation of the line. So again, I know it's not perfect, but in very approximate terms, 14, 16, and I'm going to say 0, 4. A lot of people could, of course, do it without this, but just to be thorough, you can use Desmos to your advantage, and it says something like 0.86x plus 4. Now, from the answer options, it's obviously positive slope and positive y-intercept, which is A. Of 300,000 paper clips, 234,000 are size large. What percent of the paper clips are size large? Well, it's simply large over total. So this is just arithmetic. 240 divided by 300 is 80%. Oh, did I say that wrong? I'm sorry. 234 divided by 300 is 78%. Table shows 3 values of x and their corresponding values of y. There is a linear relationship. So here is a perfect example of applying the linear regression ability of Desmos. And to do that, you hit the plus sign right here and you hit the table. You're telling it 2 points on a line, and it's coming up with the equation of the line that goes through both of those points. And you could have used any pair. Any 2 rows of this grid would suffice. And it's negative 5x plus 18. So this really just does it for you on Desmos. Function defined by that, what is the value of f of 2? Well, you could arithmetically plug in 2, or if you wanted, you could actually make a table and insert your own value. Let's do it that way from Desmos just to show the features. So I believe if you hit the gear wheel, and then here, sure. And it automatically includes 2 in the grid of numbers. So the answer is 77. This is the rules of exponents. So you're probably best simply understanding the rules from memory. But because multiplication is commutative, I'm going to write this the long way for instructive purposes. Times z to the negative 1 times m times q to the 5th times z to the 3rd. And you could switch the order because multiplication is commutative. And then in any situation where you have a base to a power and a base to another power, you add the powers. This becomes m to the 5, and then q to the 9, and z to the 1, m to the 5, q to the 9, z to the... Oh, God, I miscopied that. My mistake. This was z to the 3, which I miscopied onto the second line. So this was z to the third, z to the third, which creates z to the second. Triangle ABC is similar to triangle XYZ, where AB and C correspond to XYZ. So you should always draw the picture for a geometry question when it's not given. ABC 170, 850. So they're not necessarily right triangles, and in fact, they could look like anything, but just for very approximate purposes, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and they correspond in that order. AB is 170 when BC is 850. So of course, this is not to scale at all. YZ is 60. What is the length of XY? So you would do this by proportion. You could say 170 is to 850 as the unknown, the dot. Now, technically, I teach my students to call this lowercase z because lowercase z is across from capital Z by convention in the labeling of a triangle. You could cross multiply this or simply realize that this reduces to 17/85, which reduces to 1 part in 5 is z over 60. And then you could probably just see that in your mind, but the answer is 12. X over y is 4. What is 24x over n? Oh, and 24x over ny equals 4. So x over y equals 4 and 24x over ny equals 4. Well, it's kind of a weird spot, but this is this. So the equation on the right-hand side could have been conceived of as 24 over n times x over y being 4. And of course, by substitution, that itself is a 4 in the pink. So 24 over n times 4 is 4. 24 over n is 1, which of course means that n itself is 24. The function W models the volume of liquid in milliliters in a container t seconds after it begins draining from a hole at the bottom. According to the model, what is the predicted volume in milliliters draining from the container each second? If you wanted to, you could graph this. So it's a slope of -4 and effectively a y-intercept of 300. So this is 0, 300 if this is W of t and this is t, and it has a slope of -4. But a slope -4 is of course that 4 milliliters are draining per unit of time, which is in seconds. You do have to sometimes be careful because in certain situations they change the units in the phrasing of the question. But in this case, it's seconds, and each second it's just 4. The graph of that is shown where the function f is defined by f of x equals, sure, a standard third power polynomial. For how many values of x does f of x equal 0? Well, f of x equaling 0 is the function having a 0, otherwise known as an x-intercept or a root or a solution. And you can see just looking at the picture that happens when x is -1, +4, and +7, which makes the answer 3.